My name is Marcus, and I'm 29 years old. For most of my life, I believed that family was everything. I thought blood was thicker than water, that siblings would always have each other's backs, and that love could overcome any obstacle. I was naive. What I learned over the past year is that greed can turn even the closest family members into strangers, and that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will hurt you the deepest. This is the story of how my older brother Derek tried to steal my inheritance while I was serving overseas, and how a single document hidden in an old shoebox changed everything. Growing up, Derek was the golden child, 3 years older than me. He was everything our parents wanted in a son. He was the star quarterback in high school, graduated summa cum laude from business school, and landed a high-paying job at a prestigious accounting firm right out of college. Derek was charming, successful, and had a way of making everyone around him feel like they were part of something special. I, on the other hand, was what you might call the black sheep. I wasn't particularly good at sports. I struggled academically, and I never seemed to meet my parents' expectations. While Derek was bringing home trophies and academic awards, I was bringing home detention slips and disappointing report cards. Don't get me wrong, my parents loved me, but there was always this underlying sense that I was the consolation prize, the son they got stuck with after hitting the jackpot with Derek. Family dinners were filled with conversations about Derek S's latest promotion, or his new house, or his perfect girlfriend, Sarah. When the conversation turned to me, it was usually my mother asking when I was going to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. The turning point came when I was 22. I had dropped out of college after 2 years of mediocre grades and was working a dead-end job at a hardware store. I felt lost, directionless, and frankly ashamed of the disappointment I saw in my parents' eyes whenever they looked at me. That's when I decided to join the army. My parents were horrified. Derek tried to talk me out of it, insisting that military service was throwing my life away. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was making a decision that was truly mine. The army gave me structure, purpose, and most importantly, it gave me a chance to prove that I was more than just Derek's disappointing younger brother. I thrived in the military. I discovered that I was actually quite intelligent when I applied myself, and I had natural leadership abilities that had never been recognized before. I specialized in communications, technology, and quickly rose through the ranks. Within 4 years, I had earned my sergeant stripes and was being recommended for officer training. My parents were proud, but I could tell they still saw my military career as a temporary detour rather than a real profession. They were constantly asking when I was going to come home and get a real job. Derek, meanwhile, had gotten married, bought a house in the suburbs, and was making 6 figures at his accounting firm. In 2022, I received orders for a deployment to Eastern Europe as part of a NATO support mission. It wasn't a combat deployment, but it would keep me overseas for 18 months working on classified communications infrastructure. I was excited about the opportunity. It was a chance to use my skills on important work and potentially earn a commendation that would help my career. My family was less enthusiastic. My mother cried when I told her, and my father spent the entire conversation talking about how dangerous it would be. Derek, as usual, tried to convince me that I was making a mistake. "Marcus, you've proven your point," he said during our last family dinner before I left. "You've shown everyone that you can be responsible and successful. But this military thing doesn't have to be your whole life. I could get you an interview at my firm. You'd start at entry level, but with your work ethic, you'd move up quickly." I appreciated that Derek was trying to help, but I also felt like he didn't really understand who I had become. The army wasn't just a job for me, it was my calling. I had found something I was genuinely good at, something that made a difference in the world. "Thanks, Derek, but I'm exactly where I want to be," I told him. Derek shook his head. "You're wasting your potential, Marcus, but I guess you have to learn that the hard way." Looking back, I wonder if that conversation planted the first seed of what would happen next. I deployed in March 2022, and for the first few months, everything seemed normal. I called home every week, exchanged emails regularly with my family, and sent photos of my work, the non-classified parts. Anyway, my parents seemed to be adjusting to having their younger son on the other side of the world, and Derek was keeping them updated on his latest business successes. Then, in August, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was 3 a.m. my time when my phone rang. International calls from home always made me nervous. Nothing good ever happened at 3 a.m. When I saw Derek's number on the screen, my heart started racing. "Marcus," Derek's voice was shaky, and I could tell he had been crying. "What's wrong? Are Mom and Dad okay?" "Marcus, I'm so sorry. Dad had a heart attack yesterday morning. He's gone." The world stopped. My father, who had always seemed invincible to me, was dead at 61. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. What happened? Was he sick? I just talked to him last week and he seemed fine. Derek explained that Dad had collapsed at work. It was sudden and massive. The doctor said he probably didn't suffer. Mom had found him when the hospital called her. "How is Mom handling it?" I asked. "Not well. She's not taking care of herself. I'm worried about her. I immediately started making arrangements to come home for the funeral. Getting leave approved for a family emergency while on deployment is complicated, but my commanding officer was understanding and helped expedite the paperwork. I'll be home in 3 days, I told Derek. Can you handle everything until then? Of course, I've already started making arrangements. Don't worry about anything, just focus on getting home safely. Derek sounded like he was holding it together better than I was, which wasn't surprising. He had always been the responsible one, the one who handled crises with calm efficiency. I was grateful that he was there to take care of Mom and handle the practical details, while I tried to process my grief from 8,000 miles away. What I didn't know was that Derek was already putting a plan into motion that would devastate our family even more than Dad's death already had. The flight home was the longest 18 hours of my life. I sat in that uncomfortable military transport plane, staring out the window and thinking about all the conversations I would never have with my father. All the things I had planned to tell him about my deployment, about my career plans, about the life I was building for myself. Dad and I had a complicated relationship. He was old school, a blue-collar guy who had worked his way up from nothing to build a successful construction company. He never quite understood my decision to join the military, but I knew he was proud of me in his own way. The last time we talked, he had actually asked me about my work and seemed genuinely interested in what I was doing overseas. Now, I would never get to show him how far I had come, or prove to him that his younger son had finally figured out his life. Derek picked me up from the airport, and I was struck by how much older he looked. The stress of the past few days had aged him, and his usually perfect appearance was disheveled. We hugged in the terminal, both of us crying. "How is Mom really doing?" I asked as we drove to the house. "Bad, Marcus, really bad. She hasn't eaten properly since it happened, and she's barely sleeping. I'm afraid she's going to make herself sick." When we got to my childhood home, I was shocked by what I saw. The house, which had always been immaculate, was a mess. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink, mail was scattered across the kitchen counter, and the whole place had an air of neglect that was completely foreign to our family. Mom was sitting in Dad's favorite chair, still in her pajamas, even though it was mid-afternoon. When she saw me, she broke down completely. "Oh Marcus, I'm so glad you're home. I don't know what I'm going to do without him." I held my mother while she cried, and I felt a rage building inside me. Dad was only 61. He should have had at least 20 more years with us. It wasn't fair. Over the next few days, Derek handled most of the funeral arrangements, while I focused on taking care of Mom. Derek seemed to know exactly what to do. He had already contacted the funeral home, arranged for the obituary to be published, and started notifying Dad's business contacts and old friends. "You're amazing at this," I told him as we reviewed the funeral program he had put together. "I don't know what Mom and I would do without you." Derek gave me a tight smile. "Family takes care of family, right? Besides, you're dealing with your own grief. I'm just glad I can help." The funeral was beautiful. Derek had arranged for Dad's favorite hymns to be sung, and the flowers were exactly what Dad would have wanted. Hundreds of people showed up, friends, family, business associates, and guys Dad had worked with over the years. It was a testament to the kind of man my father had been. But even in my grief, I started to notice some strange things. First, Derek seemed unusually interested in Dad's paperwork. While I was sitting with Mom or greeting visitors, Derek was constantly shuffling through files in Dad's office, making phone calls, and having hushed conversations with people I didn't recognize. Second, Derek had taken over all communication with Dad's lawyer and accountant. When I asked about Dad's will or what would happen to the business, Derek told me not to worry about it. Dad set everything up properly. Derek said, "We'll deal with all the legal stuff after the funeral. Right now, we just need to focus on saying goodbye." Third, Derek had started making decisions about Dad's personal belongings without consulting me or Mom. I caught him packing up Dad's office, and when I asked what he was doing, he said he was securing important documents. "Shouldn't we wait and go through this stuff together?" I asked. "There's no point in letting Mom see all this business paperwork," Derek replied. "It'll just upset her more. I'm just making sure everything important is safe." At the time, I assumed Derek was just being his usual take-charge self. He was the older brother, the responsible one, the one with business experience. It made sense that he would handle the practical details, while I took care of the emotional side of things. I was scheduled to return to my deployment in 5 days. It wasn't enough time to properly grieve or help Mom adjust to her new reality, but the military doesn't pause for personal tragedy. Derek assured me that he would take care of everything. "Don't worry about Mom," he said as he drove me back to the airport. "I'll make sure she's okay, and I'll handle all the estate stuff, so you don't have to worry about it while you re-overseas. Are you sure? I feel terrible leaving you to deal with everything. Marcus, you've already sacrificed enough for this country. Let me handle the home front. When you get back, everything will be sorted out." I hugged my brother goodbye, grateful for his support and feeling guilty about leaving him to handle such a difficult situation alone. I had no idea that Derek had just played me perfectly. After returning to my deployment, I threw myself into my work. Grief is a strange thing. Some days I felt completely normal, and other days the reality of Dad's death would hit me like a truck. The military kept me busy, which was probably a blessing. But the time difference made it hard to stay connected with what was happening at home. For the first month after the funeral, Derek called me regularly with updates. Mom was slowly getting better. He said she had started eating properly again and was seeing a grief counselor. Derek had taken over managing Dad's construction business temporarily and was working with the accountant to sort out the financial situation. It's more complicated than Dad let on. Derek told me during one of our calls. The business has some debt issues, and there are tax complications we need to work through. Nothing major, but it's taking time to untangle everything. I trusted Derek completely. He was the one with the business background, and he was the one who was there dealing with everything in person. When he told me that probate was taking longer than expected because of complications with the estate, I didn't question it. But around October, things started to change. Derek's calls became less frequent. When I called home, he was always too busy to talk for long. Mom sounded better when I spoke with her, but she seemed vague about the details of what was happening with Dad's affairs. Derek is handling everything, she would say when I asked about the business or the house. I don't really understand all that legal stuff. He says not to worry about it. By November, I was starting to feel uneasy. I hadn't received any official documents about Dad's estate, which seemed strange. When someone dies, there's usually a lot of paperwork that needs to be signed, insurance claims to file, accounts to be settled. But Derek kept telling me that everything was being handled and that I didn't need to worry about any of it while I was overseas. The lawyer is taking care of all the paperwork, Derek said during one of our increasingly brief phone calls. When you get home, we'll sit down and go over everything. But right now, the most important thing is that you focus on your deployment and stay safe. I tried to call Dad's lawyer directly, but I was told that Derek was handling the estate and that all communication needed to go through him. Same thing with Dad's accountant and the business partners. Derek had effectively cut me out of any information about my father's estate. In December, I received an email from Derek that made my blood run cold. The subject line was "Update on Dad's estate," and I opened it expecting to finally get some real information about what was happening. Instead, Derek informed me that after consulting with lawyers and accountants, it had been determined that Dad's estate was largely insolvent. The business debts were more extensive than anyone had realized, and most of Dad's assets would need to be sold to pay creditors. I know this isn't what any of us wanted to hear, Derek wrote. But Dad apparently made some poor financial decisions in his last few years. The house will need to be sold, and there won't be much left after everything is settled. I am working with Mom to help her find a small apartment that she can afford on Social Security. I read that email 3 times, and something didn't add up. Dad's construction business had been successful for 20 years. He owned the family home outright, had a healthy retirement account, and had always been financially conservative. The idea that he had somehow racked up enough debt to wipe out his entire estate seemed impossible. I immediately called Derek, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried calling Mom, but she just repeated what Derek had told her about the financial problems. I don't understand it either, honey, Mom said, but Derek has been working so hard to sort everything out. He says there's nothing we can do except accept it and move on. That night, I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what was happening. Every instinct I had developed in the military was telling me that something was wrong. Derek's story didn't make sense. His behavior had been suspicious, and the timing of everything was too convenient. But I was 8,000 miles away, with limited ability to investigate anything myself. I had to trust that my brother, the golden child, the responsible one, the one who had never let the family down, was telling me the truth. That trust was about to be shattered completely. In January 2023, I received the call I had been dreading. Derek told me that the family house had been sold, and that Mom was moving into a small apartment across town. All of Dad's personal belongings had been disposed of because there wasn't room for them in Mom's new place. I saved some photo albums and a few pieces of jewelry for Mom, Derek said. But most of the furniture and Dad's tools and everything else had to go. I'm sorry, Marcus. I know you probably wanted to go through some of his stuff yourself, but we couldn't afford to store everything until you got back. I was devastated. Not only was I losing my childhood home, but I was also losing any connection to my father's memory. Those tools Derek had gotten rid of represented 40 years of Dad's working life. The furniture held decades of family memories. What about his office stuff, his papers and files? I went through everything. Most of it was just old business records and tax returns. I kept anything that seemed important. Derek, I can't believe Dad left us with nothing. Are you absolutely sure about the financial situation? There was a long pause before Derek answered. Marcus, I've been over this with 3 different lawyers and 2 accountants. Dad made some bad investments in his last few years, and he borrowed heavily against the business to try to cover the losses. I'm as shocked as you are, but the numbers don't lie. After that call, I fell into a depression that lasted for weeks. I felt like I had lost my father twice. Once when he died, and again when I learned that everything he had worked for was gone. The man I had looked up to my entire life, despite our complicated relationship, had apparently been living a lie. My commanding officer noticed my deteriorating performance and recommended that I speak with a military counselor. During our sessions, I talked about my grief, my guilt about being overseas during such a difficult time, and my struggle to accept that my father had left his family in financial ruin. Have you considered that you might not be getting the whole story? The counselor asked during one session. What do you mean? You're getting all your information secondhand from someone who has a vested interest in the outcome. Have you tried to verify any of this information independently? The counselor's question planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't shake. That evening, I started doing research online, trying to find public records about Dad's business and estate. What I found confused me even more. According to public records, Dad's construction company was still in operation and appeared to be profitable. There were no liens or judgments against the business that I could find. The sale of the family house had been handled as a private transaction, not a foreclosure, which seemed odd if Dad was really drowning in debt. Most puzzling of all, I couldn't find any record of probate proceedings for Dad's estate. When someone dies with significant assets and debts, there should be a public record of the probate process. But according to the county courthouse website, there was no probate case filed for my father. I tried calling Derek to ask about the probate records, but he didn't return my calls. When I finally reached him a week later, he seemed irritated by my questions. Marcus, why are you digging into this stuff? Do you think I'm lying to you? No, Derek. I just don't understand why there's no probate case on record. The estate was small enough to qualify for simplified probate. It doesn't show up in the regular court records. Look, I've spent months dealing with this mess while you've been overseas. Can you please just trust that I know what I'm doing? Derek's defensiveness set off alarm bells in my head, but I still couldn't bring myself to believe that my own brother was lying to me. Maybe I was just looking for someone to blame for Dad's financial failures. Maybe grief was making me paranoid, but then Mom called me with news that changed everything. Marcus, I found something in the closet that Derek might have missed. Mom said, it was in an old shoebox behind Dad's winter coats. I think it might be important. What is it, Mom? It looks like a will. A different will from the one Derek showed the lawyer. My heart stopped. Mom, are you sure? It's dated 2 years ago, and it's notarized. Derek's copy was from 5 years ago. This one is newer. What does it say? I can't really understand all the legal language, but it looks like Dad left the house to both you and Derek equally, and the business to you specifically. There's also something about a life insurance policy that I didn't know about. I felt like I was falling off a cliff. If Mom had found a more recent will, then everything Derek had told me about Dad's estate was potentially a lie. Mom, I need you to hide that will somewhere safe until I can get home. Don't tell Derek about it yet. Can you do that for me? Why? Is something wrong? I didn't want to scare Mom or make accusations against Derek without proof, but I needed to protect that document until I could figure out what was happening. I just want to have a lawyer look at it before we do anything. It might change things with the estate. Okay, honey, I'll put it somewhere safe. That night, I started making arrangements to come home early from my deployment. I told my commanding officer that there were complications with my father's estate that required my immediate attention. It wasn't technically a lie. 3 days later, I was on a plane back to the United States, carrying with me a growing suspicion that my brother had been lying to me for months. I didn't tell Derek I was coming home early. Instead, I flew directly to Mom's new apartment and asked to see the will she had found. What I read made me physically ill. The will was dated 18 months before Dad's death, making it much more recent than the one Derek had presented to the lawyer. According to this document, Dad had left the family house to Derek and me jointly, with the understanding that Mom could live there for as long as she wanted. The construction business was to be transferred entirely to me, along with all its assets and accounts. Most importantly, Dad had taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy 2 years before his death, with Derek and me as equal beneficiaries. Derek hadn't just hidden assets from me, he had stolen my entire inheritance. I took the will directly to a probate attorney named Jennifer Walsh, who reviewed it and confirmed my worst fears. The will Derek had used to settle the estate was 5 years old and had been superseded by this newer document. The entire estate settlement had been fraudulent. This is a clear case of will suppression, Jennifer told me. Your brother knew about this newer will and chose to hide it so he could inherit everything under the terms of the older document. What does that mean legally? It means your brother committed multiple felonies. Will suppression, fraud, theft. We're talking about serious criminal charges, not just a civil matter. Can we fix this? Can we get back what he stole? Absolutely. but it's going to be messy. Your brother has had months to hide assets and cover his tracks. We'll need to act quickly. Jennifer filed an emergency petition with the probate court to halt all further distribution of estate assets and to have Derek removed as executor. She also filed a criminal complaint with the district attorney's office. The legal paperwork was served to Derek at his office on a Thursday morning. He called me within an hour, and he was furious. "What the hell is wrong with you, Marcus? You're destroying our family over money." "I'm destroying our family. Derek, you stole my inheritance. You lied to me for months while I was overseas and couldn't defend myself." "I didn't steal anything. I used the will that Dad had on file with his lawyer." "You used an outdated will, and you know it." "Mom found the real will. Derek, the one from 2 years ago." There was a long silence on the phone. When Derek spoke again, his voice was different. Colder, more calculating. "You can't prove I knew about any other will." "Really? Because the new will was in Dad's filing cabinet in a folder labeled Current Will, 2021. The same filing cabinet you spent 3 days going through after the funeral." Another silence. "Marcus, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers getting involved. I'll split everything with you, 50-50, just like the new will says. We can settle this between ourselves." "It's too late for that, Derek. You had months to do the right thing. Instead, you chose to steal from me and lie to our mother." "I was trying to protect the family. You were overseas, Mom was falling apart, and someone had to make decisions. You were trying to protect yourself. You saw an opportunity to take everything, and you took it." The conversation ended with Derek hanging up on me. Over the next few weeks, the truth came out piece by piece. Derek had indeed found the newer will in Dad's filing cabinet. Instead of presenting it to the lawyer, he had hidden it and used the older will to claim the entire estate for himself. Derek had sold the family house and pocketed the proceeds. He had transferred the construction business assets to himself and closed the company. He had collected the $500,000 life insurance payout and put it in his personal account. In total, Derek had stolen approximately $800,000 that should have been split between us. But Derek had made a critical mistake. He had been so focused on hiding the newer will that he had unconsidered the possibility of copies. When Jennifer subpoenaed Dad's lawyer, we discovered that Dad had given him a copy of the newer will for safekeeping. Dad's accountant also had a copy. Derek's entire fraud fell apart in a matter of days. The criminal case moved quickly. Derek was charged with will suppression, fraud, and theft. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he accepted a plea deal that required him to make full restitution and serve 2 years in prison. The civil case took longer, but the outcome was even more satisfying. Jennifer was able to recover not just the stolen assets, but also additional damages for the emotional distress Derek's actions had caused Mom and me. Derek was forced to sell his house and liquidate his retirement accounts to pay back what he had stolen. He lost his job at the accounting firm and was banned from working in financial services. His wife Sarah filed for divorce and took half of what little he had left. By the time everything was settled, I had recovered my full inheritance plus damages. More importantly, Mom was able to move back into the family house, which we bought back from the people Derek had sold it to. The construction business took longer to resurrect, but with the help of Dad's old foreman and some of his loyal workers, I was able to get it operating again. It wasn't easy learning to run a business while still finishing my military commitment. But Dad had built something solid, and the foundation was still there. Derek served his full 2-year sentence. I didn't visit him in prison, and I didn't attend his parole hearing. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. When Derek was released, he moved to another state. I heard through mutual friends that he was working as a bookkeeper for a small business and living in a studio apartment. He had lost everything: his career, his family, his reputation, and his freedom. Most importantly, he had lost the brother who had once looked up to him more than anyone else in the world. The final twist came 6 months after Derek's release from prison. I received a letter from him, the first communication we'd had since his arrest. In it, he tried to apologize and explain his actions. "I never meant for things to go this far," he wrote. "I was overwhelmed after Dad died, and I made some bad decisions. I thought I could figure out a way to make everything work out for everyone. I know you hate me, and I don't blame you. I hate myself for what I did to our family." Derek claimed that he had originally planned to split everything with me fairly, but that he had gotten caught up in the moment and made increasingly bad choices to cover up his initial mistakes. I didn't believe him then, and I don't believe him now. Derek's theft wasn't a moment of weakness or a series of bad decisions made under stress. It was a calculated plan to steal my inheritance while I was overseas and couldn't stop him. Derek had counted on my trust, my grief, and my physical absence to pull off his scheme. He had manipulated our mother and lied to me for months while I was serving my country. The worst part wasn't the money he stole. It was the betrayal of everything I had believed about family, about trust, and about the brother I had idolized my entire life. But in the end, justice was served. Dad's real wishes were honored. Mom was taken care of, and Derek paid the price for his greed. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Mom hadn't found that will in the shoebox. Would Derek have gotten away with it? Would I have spent the rest of my life believing that Dad had died, broke, and left us with nothing? The thought keeps me awake sometimes. But then I remember that truth has a way of coming to light, especially when someone fights for it. Derek thought he could steal my inheritance and get away with it because I was thousands of miles away and couldn't stop him. He was wrong. Blood might be thicker than water, but justice is thicker than both.